Joe Richardson, Joe Speak Podcast. Now, I got a good one again. I always say that. I'm being honest. I'm always being honest. But this is a good one. It's a special one. Very important subject matter. I have a friend that I know from college who wrote a book. But what's most important about it is that this book talks about her life. And you would never know that she had the childhood that she had. It's a story that'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry. It's talking about ups and downs. It talks about excellence in the midst of crazy adversity. Doesn't make any sense. So let me get into it. Make sure you let folks know because this is an important story. She's got a book right now called When I Was Her Daughter. It's on, you can get it at Amazon, everywhere books are sold, but it's doing fantastic. It's a memoir that reads like a novel, and it's hard to believe that all of this is true, but it's actually true, and it's a great story. So my friend Leslie Ferguson is here. Leslie, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
So have you gone into the bookstore to just kind of lay low and look at your book and kind of stand next to it and see if somebody comes through and checks it out and say, "Wait, that's you"? Have you done that yet?
No, that'll be the second wave. So my book is not on any bookshelves, literally in bookstores yet.
Wow.
So that's something that if I want that, I've got to go talk to people and see if they'll carry my book.
Right.
So,
Okay. Right on.
But that's part of the dream.
Right. For sure. Well, I'm telling you, you're taking some steps, and a big part of it is writing a book that's it's riveting, it's captivating, there's a lot of things going on. So we're going to talk about the book, but at the same time, I kind of want to talk about you as well, because you are in the book, but you are not the book, right? You know what I mean? So give us a little bit of background and some of the reality that you end up talking about in your own life.
So when I was young, it was me and my brother and our mom suffered from schizophrenia. Yeah. And so my brother and I were at her mercy, and at times she was well, and then she would have episodes of psychosis and things would go pretty wild. So we had some scary times with her trying to evade the government because she believed that the government was after us and they were going to capture us and do horrible things to us. So we were essentially always running from the government. And, at some point, because she was keeping us out of school because she believed that school was brainwashing us, and eventually the authorities stepped in. So we got Child Protective Services coming, police coming to our door to take us, which happened a couple of times. And then, my brother and I are split up. We go into foster care, and things don't get better necessarily. Maybe we're safe. Maybe
Right.
He's safe and I'm safe in our respective homes. But I'm in a foster home at one point that is not good. And
Right.
I meet someone who steps in to kind of save the day.
Right.
So I've real life heroes in my story.
Right. So what's nuts about this book is many things that are nuts about it. It's just hard to believe, but it's so well written and so incredibly well written. Helps that you're an English major, right? And we're going to talk about how you actually got this out. It's one thing to have it there and to have the ability to write it, but I want to talk about those obstacles. But you forego the preliminaries. I don't think it's past page 7 or 8 when you say that your mom tried to kill you.
Right.
What happened there? Let folks know what happened there.
Well, I just woke up one night. This is when we were living with my aunt. So we didn't really have a place of our own. And I slept on the couch in the living room. It was a little love seat.
Right.
And my brother was sleeping on the floor. My mom was sleeping in a chair. And I just woke up in the night having a cough and just feeling like pressure on me. And I opened my eyes and she was strangling me. And that was really one of my first memories, probably my very first memory of her actually doing something that seemed so weird and wrong and that I didn't understand. You know, she'd had problems growing up, and I'm not sure when her psychosis hit. But, you know, all throughout her life, she probably was suffering.
Right.
And, you know, then she had me and my brother, and she's tasked with taking care of us just by herself.
Right.
And she went into psychosis.
Right. And eventually, at some point, she tries to kill herself. Right. And then there's other instances where she's engaging you to and imploring you and your brother to do something that has the potential to harm her. I mean, one part of it, I think that she wanted you guys to drive over her head with a tire.
Yeah.
You're a preteen at this time.
Yeah.
How do you even process that? Like, what's happening? Because you have some sense of right and wrong, and you know at the very least that this is out of sorts, right? How do you even start to process that at that time? I mean, how do you do that?
So I think, you know, I didn't process it. I reacted.
Right.
And so, of course, my first reaction is, no, this is crazy.
Right.
And, you know, little did I know how literal that crazy was. And, you know, that there's such a stigma now with that word. But when you're 8 years old and something is going so wrong and scary, it does just seem crazy. And I was always fighting her, trying to be the voice of reason, trying to not let her do the things she wanted to do.
Right.
So that was just it, just reacting and saying, no,
Right.
I'm not going to drive over your head.
Right. My gosh. I mean, this is so, you know, I had an English teacher that used to talk about, and I don't know if this is a good term or if it's a now term or whatever else, 30 years ago, dramatic irony of a story. And, you know, in every story, she wanted us to extract the dramatic irony. Okay, it seems like this, but here's how it really is, or, you know, whatever it is might be.
Yeah.
One of the dramatic ironies I saw was that there was this conflict that was always raging in you. It had to be raging in on the inside, but it was situational at the same time. So, like, for instance, you talk about loving and hating your mom. I mean, you know, moments at a time, right? You know, you would go I remember when you were staying with that guy named Jerry, and you want the situation to work out for certain reasons because you'd have a place to call home, but at the same time, you don't want it to work out all at the same time. Even when you meet, and we'll talk more about meeting mom and dad, who at that time were Mr. and Mrs. Ferguson, even wanting them to be your mom and dad, but you're still testing them and pushing them away because you're scared. Talk about just the conflicts that you would have to deal with, you know, all the time in terms of just what you were trying to accomplish on a daily basis.
Well, I think on a daily basis, I was trying to achieve some kind of harmony and stasis where things could be what I thought were normal, you know,
Right.
from just watching TV or talking to other people, seeing how my grandparents lived, just having some kind of normalcy and balance where things weren't scary and erratic.
Right.
And on a deeper level, I was just trying to be loved by my mom and trying to do what I could to make her love me. And I think I always felt like maybe even though she said she loved me and I knew that she did, there was always a part of me that really questioned it.
Right.
Not only because she was trying to kill me,
Right.
but because I felt such a difference in her love for me compared to what I saw in her love for my brother. And
Sure.
you know, parents always say, you know, we can't pick favorites. We love you both equally. But at that time, I think I really always was in competition with my brother for her love.
Wow, it's huge. When did you go from, and you can correct me if it didn't really happen this way, but I feel like, and this a lot of times this happens with kids where you have to emotionally, you're relied on like you're an adult, and you have to draw on reserves that you don't have. And you have to be pragmatic about how you deal with situations and how you keep your chin up all the times where, you know, you would get dropped off back at, wherever you may have been staying, and even your grandfather would be like, okay, keep your chin up, because he knew how difficult it was, but that was going to be your reality. When did you go? I still see you trying to save other people. I see you trying to keep your brother, because you're the older sister. I see you in some ways trying to protect your mom sometimes from herself. So when do you go from, or was there a process that had you going from trying to save others, namely your mom, to somebody saving you?
Well, literally, that I think began to happen when I finally spoke up to my social worker. Yeah. Well, it was actually to the woman that I was living with at the time. Was my second foster mother. Yeah. And, I said, I don't want to live here anymore. I want to find someplace else. And she didn't understand, because I believe she was a good woman and she was doing her best. And for me, that was the first time I'd been separated from my brother. Yeah. So it was more just my deep loneliness. But every time I would go visit my grandparents and come back to the foster home, I just felt this incredible sickness, just this nausea in the pit of my stomach. And I just didn't feel right. I didn't feel seen or cared for or cared about, or like I could even move forward unless something changed. Sure. So there's another part in the book that I don't really want to talk about right now to give it away. Sure. You might pull it out of me later. Right. But, I started using my voice to knowingly that I could say what I wanted or what I needed. Yeah. And I might not get it, but that I was going to be damned if I wasn't going to try. Right. So, in the book, you see me as a young kid standing up against my mom in these really harrowing situations. Right. But I still felt like I never had a say in things, because as kids, you're ushered around, you go where adults tell you to go, you do what they tell you to do, and you learn from them. You learn from watching them. Yeah. So I think, there's one time in the book where I really use my voice to enact change. And then this time that I'm referring to in the foster home, where I just said, I want to talk to my social worker, this man that I'd only seen a couple of times. And they moved me to another foster home. Right. So, and that foster home ended up being even worse. Right. But what a lucky thing to have happened, because that's when I met the person who ended up saving me. Right. Unbelievable. Let's talk a little bit, and we're going to get into to who became your mom and dad. Mm-hmm. And I think there's not an irony, but I think there was an intentionality with the title. Tell me why you titled the book When I Was Her Daughter. Well, I did struggle with the title for a long time, and I don't remember how I came up with this title, but I did a lot of journaling and writing down lists and searching Amazon and the internet for titles, because I wanted mine to be unique. Right. And at some point I settled on this, When I Was Her Daughter, because there was a scene that I was writing about when I no longer feel like I'm her daughter, because I haven't been with her for so long that I'm forgetting. I'm forgetting what she looked like. I'm forgetting the sound of her voice. I'm forgetting the scent of her skin. All of these things that were so palpable for me growing up. Right. And I felt other. There was this time between when she was no longer my mother because she wasn't taking care of us. We weren't in her custody. And this time between I found someone else who took on the role in such a meaningful way. So the title just became almost organic in that. Sure. And when I would test it, asking people, what do they think of the title? They just loved it. Yeah. And I loved it too. So I started to trust myself with it. Right. And this idea, someone said once, I don't get it. What do you mean when I was her daughter, when you were her daughter? You're always her daughter. Right. And this was someone who hadn't read the book or any of my chapters really. And I said, well, that's the point, is that it's not so black and white or cut and dry, that we go through these phases of otherness and being friends with someone and then not. Well, what if we take that to this extreme, being her daughter, but also not, and then becoming someone else's daughter, which makes me in a way not her daughter even more, and
Right.
also her daughter forever. It's so complicated.
Right.
And ultimately, I think I liked the title because it seemed to ask those questions,
Right.
and it seemed to embody those complications that I was
Yeah.
trying to convey in the story.
Right. Right. Yeah. Like there's a transition, there's a midway, there's a start, and there's an ending, and there's a change for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the outlets that helped you as a child. It was interesting. It stuck out to me that when you were in school, you absolutely excelled at school. You understood it. Maybe it was an escape for you, but you also were very good at it. You're also very good at sports, and that continued to be part of your journey. But talk about just the outlets that made you come to a different place and a different feeling, and made you feel like you had power and control. I think even you talked about how empowering volleyball was for you to play.
I think early on, I would escape by coloring and writing, doodling, drawing little things. And I wrote a story and then a poem in school once. And I think this idea of this creative, like fantasy world was a good escape for me, that I
Right.
could, when I was coloring, I could focus on the picture or the story that I was coloring and making the colors beautiful and coloring inside the lines. It was this challenge for me that was a big sort of escapism, because I
Right.
could color and just tune everything out.
Sure.
And then music became part of that as well, when I could
Right.
just put on my headphones and just drown everything out.
Right.
And it wasn't so much the meanings of the lyrics, sometimes it was, but
Right.
it was the sound of the music and how I could feel it beating in my chest, almost like I was becoming music.
Right.
And after that, it became sports.
Right.
It, started with, I want to play volleyball. There's volleyball tryouts.
Right.
And so I went, and then it was basketball season,
Right.
and I went to tryouts and I played, and that became something so instrumental for me. When I look back on it, I didn't realize it at the time,
Yeah. Sure.
but because I had that, I was able to drive my body and get exercise, which is a great outlet for stress. And I believe that, while I was playing, I was focused on that. And that was at least 2 hours a day when I was focused only on that,
Right.
and not about my past, not about
Yeah.
anything that was painful. And it became a healthy outlet because I was just aggressive and pounding. And I think I got to let out all of that pent up anger and frustration that I held over the years.
Right.
And then just going to school was an outlet, especially when I was younger.
Right.
So it was awful to be kept out of school
Sure.
and to be told that I couldn't go,
Right.
because that was where I got to just do math and play with friends and run around the schoolyard. It was a type of freedom.
Right.
So I think that I became good at school and good at sports is no surprise to me,
Right.
because that's where I turned to
Right.
seek comfort, and also where I could excel and be good. I wanted to be good at stuff.
Right.
I wanted to be seen as good.
Right.
So it kind of fed into it.
Right. So along comes Mrs. Ferguson. Let's set this up a little bit. I think, let me know if I got this wrong, because
Okay.
I read most of the book, but I told you off camera I skipped about 50 pages. But in any event, 250, 260 out of 304, 305 is not terrible. But in any event, you stood up and asked about being put into another foster home, got put into one that was even worse. But the local school was the school where Mrs. Ferguson was your teacher. And
Right.
apparently she sticks out to you as maybe the nicest teacher you'd ever had, even though you always liked school and excelled when you got to go. And then one day she actually changes the rules for you. Would you talk about that, please?
Oh, so this is a story that has probably made me cry the most when I tell it.
Well, you
And-
don't have to if you don't need to.
Okay, no, I can do it.
Okay.
I think, now that it's written, it's in the book, it's out. So we'll see how it goes. So, yeah, one day I'm just sitting in my desk and she addresses the class and says she's going to change the rules.
Right.
And before, she had a no eating policy.
Right.
But now she figured, you know what? If we're hungry, if we want to have a little snack, maybe
Right.
some grapes, maybe something, something little, not
Right.
something that's going to make a big mess or be loud, but just
Right.
a little snack that, we should be able to have a snack.
Right.
And she talked about the importance of throwing away our trash. And
Right.
so I was like, wow. And I don't know at what point, after that, there was something in my desk. I came to school and we had those little cubby desks.
Right.
I think everybody remembers
Right.
back in the day,
Right.
all those years ago when we were in school.
Right.
And it would be a desktop and maybe a double, two people could sit there. And then they had these little cubbies that were sectioned off. So I had my cubby and there was something in it that I didn't put there.
Right.
And I poked it. I was like, I don't know what this is,
Right.
And then I realized as I kind of got closer and looked and realized what it was, that it was food.
Right.
It was like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich wrapped in foil,
Right.
a little baggie of pretzels,
Right.
and an apple.
Right.
And at first, I didn't put it together that was there for me.
Right.
I thought somebody had accidentally put something there, or that maybe I was sitting in the wrong place.
Right.
And I just kind of, like, all right, I don't know what this is. But then I realized that Mrs. Ferguson had put it there for me.
Right.
Because she knew that, or she suspected, I think.
Right.
Because I don't know that I had talked to her about what was going on in the home I was in.
Right. Right.
I was pretty shy about that. I was pretty private.
Sure.
And to me, nothing was even really wrong with the way I was being treated. It was just
Right.
another cold, lonely home, even though there was a lot wrong with it.
Sure.
I don't know if at that point Mrs. Ferguson had looked at my cume folder and had done some research about me and the home I was in.
Right.
I don't know how she knew I was hungry.
Right.
But I do know, and this is talked about in the book, one day I'm really sick and I go to the bathroom and I throw up my breakfast.
Right.
But the sickness was more, not like I was getting the flu, but it was like I was starving. Like I was so
Right.
hungry, so gaunt and pale.
Right.
So she might have put two and two together
Yeah. Yeah.
at that point.
Just
So,
amazing. And so she basically brings you food and puts it in the desk every week. She's real every day. She's real
every day.
discreet about it,
Yep.
and so was this third grade, fourth grade? What was this? A little later.
Sixth.
Okay, it was sixth
Grade.
grade. Okay. And so you would kind of talk to her at lunch and that kind of thing. And tell me about how the relationship kind of developed.
Well, she was just like the kindest, nicest person who was genuinely helping her students learn. And she just gave us so much time and so much patience. And she would give us prizes for good behavior and good grades. And there were prizes that spoke to me, like stickers and pencils and free time, where one of the things that I ended up cutting from the book is a scene where I have earned free time and I got to leave the classroom with a friend and go play handball on the handball courts.
Wow.
It was just us.
Right.
And she trusted us. She's like, you've earned your free time, you go. And so we got to go take a half an hour and just play handball.
Right.
And so there were these things that she did that it's like no other teacher ever did that,
Right.
Right. And she would let me help her. Like I would
Right.
go with her when she'd make copies and, pass papers out. And I think we just kind of clicked.
Right.
And still, I don't remember ever telling anything specific
Right.
to her about my situation.
Right.
And
Right.
then, one day she'd been doing all this research about me and I didn't
Right.
even know.
Right. Yeah.
And, then she asked me that question.
Right.
Kind of came out of nowhere, of course. You don't expect that your teacher's going to ask you to come and live with her.
Right.
Um,
Amazing. And what's so funny is this is the part I love. Like as a dad of a daughter, this really got me where, you find out later, it's in the book. And I don't know if you found that out while you were researching for the book or if they told you that story years ago or whatever else, that she's going home talking to Mr. Ferguson about you all the time. And at some point he says, well, you know what? You either need to stop talking about her or bring her home. Yep. Wow,
Yep.
dude. That's just nuts to me. And so you go home and you go home with them, and even on that last night, the people that you were with that had treated you so bad and gave you third tier food, right? They were, there was the one tier for these folks and the next tier for the foster that had been there longer, and then there was you. You know what I mean? So they kick you out, but you still feel. Talk about that. The idea that even from these folks that are not fits for you, that they're impressive environments and things like that, you still had to deal with the real notion of rejection. And when you got picked up that night, they had literally kicked you out of the house. So you're waiting along the curb.
Right.
Talk about those feelings of having that rejection and how you deal with that, even in a situation where you don't want to be. That's not ideal. You know what I mean? There was still this fear of rejection.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this was in the part that you skipped or not, but so when I was looking for a new foster home with my social worker, we went to visit one place,
right,
and I had dinner with the family and then went outside to swing on the swing set with their little boy.
Right. Where you asked for a full glass of milk and you had poured half and you hadn't started on it yet. Yeah. Right. I did get that part.
They didn't want me. They rejected me.
Right.
And that was the first time I realized, like, what? You mean they were interviewing me, or they were seeing if they would want me? Right. What about me? I'm trying to find a place where I can be.
Right.
And that sense of rejection was so loud to me.
Sure.
And so when we found this other home, it seemed perfect.
Yeah.
It seemed like I had died and gone to heaven.
Right.
And it was all a show, or they believed that they were really doing good things for foster kids. And I think that goes to the heart of it, where they were in it to say that they were foster parents, that they were taking care of these kids who had nowhere else to go. They were buying them Christmas presents and giving them a home and food. Well, it's hard then to realize that I wasn't happy with that, because it's complicated, right?
Sure.
On the surface, that sounds like, well, what were you complaining about? Right. Well, it's all the details that really tell the truth of this family and how we were being treated. So that night when my social worker called to come pick me up, they were so loud and so mean to me that I was glad to go wait outside.
Right, sure.
But again, it's like, here I am out in the cold again by myself. I don't really know what comes next.
Yeah.
I know cerebrally that I'm being driven to my teacher's house.
Yeah.
And she lives there with her husband, this man that I've met one time.
Right.
And that's it. What if that was going to be terrible too?
Right, sure.
So it's rejection. You're always wondering, when am I going to be rejected next?
Right.
Who's going to fall, you know? So I was very scared of that.
Right. And so this ends up being a fit. You as naturally someone in your position would, you do some pushing away and you do things that kids do. But your mom showed incredible patience. And, even when you said, like, I don't like you, I think you said it stronger than that, or whatever else is, she let you know. She's like, there's nothing you can do. You're our kid. So, hey, you might as well just go and get there. You know what I mean? What was it like just feeling that? At what point did you understand that there was something really different going on here? It wasn't just a good start that descended into chaos, but you actually, but this was a different situation.
I think I learned that there was a difference between, my complaining and being upset or just feeling like there was a lack of contentment and like,
Right.
you know, I'm fine, I'm going to go live with my grandparents. And, you know, there's a part in the book where we're having like an argument and I say, I'm going to go call my grandparents. And they remind me, well, you know, why aren't you at your grandparents already? You know,
Well, keeping it real, right?
and they couldn't handle it anymore.
Right.
And I said, well, my aunt. And they said, well, you tried to live with her too, and she wouldn't let you live with her. So where are you going to go?
Right.
So there was that feeling trapped.
Yeah.
But also, for the first time, I think I started to realize how other people maybe interpreted or viewed what I was saying
Right.
in a way that wasn't my intention.
Sure.
Like when my aunt thought that I needed the child abuse hotline phone number.
Sure.
Thought that my teacher and her husband were abusing me.
Mm.
I was so angry. So I think I started realizing that, you know, it's almost like I could do anything to them and they would still not send me away. Right. And I didn't fully believe it, even though that's what they were telling me.
Right.
As they kept showing it and showing it
for sure
up for me again and again and again over time, over many years.
Yeah.
So I would test them and see they're going to be right. I'm going to be evil. I'm going to be mean. I'm going to be rowdy. I'm going to be, you know, awful.
Right.
And I was probably very good, but in my mind, I wanted to do something that would give me justification for why they were pushing me away if they pushed me away.
Right. Amazing. And so, of course, we don't want to give away too much of the book, but when did it happen that you knew that this was your forever place? Was it the act of them moving to adopt you? And we don't necessarily have to tell that whole story because there's some drama and some bumps in the road even on that. Was it that gesture and what it represented, or was it, you know, how you felt leading up to it so that you knew that that was the confirmation of it? Or does it even go further than that? Because, you know, I think that all these things are process. I don't know that you ever snap your fingers and you say, okay, I'm there.
Yeah. I think I know that they're sticking around only because they did last week.
Right.
And last week I knew it because they did the week before that.
Right.
You know, like it's almost hard for me to say that there's always some part of me that feels like there's going to come a day when that's it. I did something, or they don't want to deal with it, or they don't want to handle it. And logically, I know that can't be so.
Right.
So growing up with them, it was a superficial thing for me to be floating on the surface, living on the surface, and still like they want to adopt me. Okay, I'll be adopted. Then I'll be a real family. Then they can't let me go.
Right.
But the concern over, well, would my brother still be my brother if you adopt me? And, you know, what about my other mom? If I have a new mom now, does that mean that I'm no longer her daughter?
Right.
And it was very difficult for me to think about things on a real level. Yeah. So I just floated. I became a Ferguson. I was using their name, even legally my name. And everybody thought that I was their daughter because I started at a new school at a junior high, and people came in from other schools. So nobody knew that I was the new girl.
Right.
And I just kept, I think, doing my best and trying to be perfect. If I could be perfect, then of course they wouldn't want to let me go, because how could anybody let somebody perfect go?
Right. Well, but even then, you still, you know, did the things girls do. You had a thing with, you know, going and, you know, getting the makeup and doing the stuff at the mall and that kind of stuff. And it was really interesting how you seemed to react to your mom just expressing disappointment. It wasn't even so much this whole punitive thing that you were getting grounded forever, but even just the expression of disappointment, you really responded to that. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, because even though I knew I had different ideas about who I wanted to be and how I wanted to be seen, and she couldn't understand that, and she and my dad had rules, I still was going to do what everybody else did. Right. And the realization, though, that it wasn't that she wouldn't love me anymore, it was that she expected better of me, and that it was an appointment. And that was really, I think, the first time that I felt that, because even as a child, if I disappointed my biological mom, it was like no big deal. It's like, whatever, mom. And I think that's probably closer to what a lot of kids in their biological families feel,
Right.
because there is never a question of where are you going to go. It's like you're just, you're a family, whether
Right.
it's dysfunctional or whatever. But this idea that I I disappointed this person who had done so much for me,
Right.
and she wasn't doing it in a way that was like being a martyr.
Right.
She never put that on me.
Yeah.
It was always just the expectation that I should be honest and that I should be good and have integrity.
Right.
And these were the principles, the values that she and my dad had.
Right.
And it only made sense to them to try their best to instill that in me.
Right.
And I still, it wasn't until college where I finally got it that,
Yeah.
you know what, they were right about everything. Like I
Right.
should have just never, because they just know so much and they're so wise and they love me and
Right.
they
Right.
guide me with true heart and compassion and loyalty. And I cut this part out of the book too, I think, where one day we're having a basketball game and it was during warmups and we were shooting around and someone had shot a ball and it came down and just hit me in the face. And it was like I literally saw stars, but this thought came to me, like this pop of an idea, like, oh my gosh, everything my parents have ever said, everything they've ever tried to tell me, it was all true. It was all
Right.
right.
It's an aha moment.
You know, moment of finding religion.
That's hilarious.
And I started really, I think at that point, really appreciating them more than I ever had.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a wonderful thing. Tell me, with your life, and as you talk about in the book, has bumped up against a lot of issues. Has it made you an advocate, or at least somebody that pays extra attention to certain issues? I mean, I'm talking about homelessness. I'm talking about mental illness. I'm talking about other health issues, and just so many different things that your past made you come across. How does that make you look at those issues, and are there particular issues you have extra concern about today? Child welfare, the foster care system. I mean, it's like, take your pick. You saw so much of it. How does that affect how you look at those things now?
I do think that I am very socially liberal regarding those aspects. And I
Right.
believe that we as a society have a duty to take care of each other.
Right.
Um,
Right.
over the years have tried to get involved as a mental health advocate,
Sure.
and
Sure.
even looking at, people would say, well, are you going to take in a foster kid? And I think it's been really hard for me, because I think, yeah, you know what? I should be an advocate. I should become a mentor for someone with mental illness, or I should become a foster parent, even though I don't want to do those things.
Right.
And with the mental illness advocacy, I went through interviews and um, was selected to be a volunteer and a mentor for NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. And as I was going through the process, I started having a lot of emotional, I don't want to say problems, but maybe I found
Yeah.
myself very edgy,
Right.
very distressed and depressed, and I didn't know why. And I was talking with my brother, and he goes, well, yeah, you're going to go work one-on-one with the mentally ill. He goes, didn't you get that enough of that in your
Yeah.
childhood, in your
Yeah.
life?
Sure.
Why do
Trial
you
by
want to go?
fire. Yeah.
Yeah, and it hit me like there's got to be something else. So um, I don't I don't have kids. I never really wanted kids.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, and it turns out that I couldn't have had them if I'd wanted, which is a whole other story. But I think that my way of helping is to bring awareness, is to write about these stories, to help bring awareness to all of this, that this is what kids are going through. And as a society, it's our job to be better. It's our job to be kinder, to treat people not only fairly, but with equality and understanding and compassion. And one of my biggest things is like, lead with compassion, because you never know what somebody else is going through. They may bring a smile, they may bring their A game, but we still need to be kind because there's something going on. And I haven't always been the best at that. I have moments where as a teacher, maybe I was too focused on the subject matter and that the kids understand what, grammar is or whatever. And as later in my teaching years, I started being more compassionate, I think. And I had to kind of grow into that. And so, I believe there's a Together We Rise, which is an organization that helps foster children. So that one's big on my list. And I've always thought, it's just me, little old me. What can I do? And I'm not an activist. I'm not this, I'm not going to start a revolution, but I think quietly I can be kind to everybody. I can write my story and hope that has some kind of an effect, a positive effect.
Well, let me ask you this to end, and this is great, and we could talk forever, but people, you got to get the book, and then you'll know, you really got to, read it. I'm telling you, it's amazing. But who needs to read this book, and what do you want them to take from it?
Okay. I think foster kids should read this book.
Right.
I think any kid feeling displaced or dispossessed and lonely can find something in this book, because I was that kid. Right. And I had a few things going for me, which really worked in my favor, that I'm so grateful for. But I think that I had hope. I put one foot in front of the other. I learned how to become my own self-advocate. And I think if teenagers can see that there's hope, that they have a voice, that they can be their own agents and advocates in the world, that they have some say in how their lives turn out. I think that parents should read this book, because I think a lot of parenting goes into this, especially when we look at the foster parents and how I believe, their tactics were just cruel, and nobody should be treated the way that the foster kids were treated in that house. And even my adoptive mom will say that looking back, she and my dad were too strict and they should have let me do this and do that. And I think she sees some parenting errors where I thank God the way that they were the way they were, because they kept me honest, they kept me safe, they kept me safe. Cute. And the fact that I was a little scared of what they might do, the fact that I was a little scared that they might send me away, that's probably, most kids don't have that, right? Because their parents are their parents. But I think that made me be a little better of a kid and to try to do right. That together with this whole, perfectionist complex that I had of like, no, I have to be perfect. So that's an individual thing that's unique to me in that. But I think a lot of kids will see that in themselves, of hoping for something better for their lives. And so if parents can learn from it, I see, even on TV shows that I watch, like, I've never been a parent, but essentially I parented over 1,000 kids in my job as a teacher. And I see these parents who want so badly to get closer to their kids, and they just keep pushing them away because everything becomes emotional, and it becomes about them, and it becomes about how they believe the kids should be. Well, these kids are coming into their own. They want to have their own freedom to be who they are. And that's one of the biggest things was growing up. I didn't really feel like I was being who I wanted to be. I was being who I thought I should be. And I was given all of these freedoms, They said, you want to play basketball? Go play basketball. You want to play volleyball? Go play volleyball. You want to go to the University of Redlands, and a school that we're not going to get financial aid for because of our status?
Right.
Go for it. Turn
And you
down.
had scholarship offers elsewhere.
Gosh.
So baller, my God. All SCIAC MVP. I didn't know all that. I knew you could play, but I'm like, word.
So, they said, we want you to be happy, because they knew one broken ankle, then I'm out. I'm not playing basketball anymore. And if I'm in a school far away from home that I'm not happy in. And I will tell you, I don't know if this part is in the book. One thing that I'm so grateful for that I never knew was going on behind my back was my parents learning about mental illness and learning that what was at stake for me as a child of mentally ill parent. That one of the biggest factors in whether or not someone who's predisposed for mental illness becomes mentally ill, one of the factors, one of the triggers is stress. So they had said to me, you go to school, basketball will be your job. You do school and you do basketball. And we don't want you to have to worry about a job. And I mean, what a gift to just get to go and play. And I just thought that I was, they were deciding to spoil me a little bit, even though they'd always tried to teach me these good values and morals, and you work hard for what you get. And, they didn't just throw money at me. It wasn't like that, but they knew that I could go to a D1 school and have it paid for, that I didn't, quote, need their money. Right. And that they were saying, but we are here for you. And we want to do everything we can to help you be safe and healthy and to have fun. Like the biggest dream I could have ever asked for. So, so this is a long question, or a long answer to your question, but I like to think that parents and children, these teachers and parents and anybody who's working with kids, working in the child welfare system, working in therapy, therapists, teachers, because even a lot of the teachers I worked with, the way they would talk about their students or how they would try to handle situations, it just made it worse for everybody. And I think that hopefully there's hope in this book. Hopefully there's inspiration. And it is a feel-good story, even though there's a lot of stuff that feels sad. I think it ends on a good note. So
it's heavy, but it's a love story, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so I appreciate you telling it. There's a process that has to happen. You're dealing with what you're dealing with, then you start to reflect on it, and it's probably a process where you still are reflecting on it. But then to actually have the skill and the ability, we didn't really talk about it, but you're an English major, you've got 2 degrees, you're a book writer, you belong to book writing clubs and all these other things. You actually had the talent and the perseverance to bring it about. So I appreciate this time. When I Was Her Daughter by Leslie Ferguson. Listen, you guys need to get this book. And if you're not sure about what to be thankful for or how to have perspective at this time, I think that this book will help you. It will remind you of the good in people. It will remind you that regardless of what it is that you're dealing with, and maybe because of what you're dealing with, you always have to hope for better, because good change starts with hope. So my dear friend, Leslie, thank you so much for taking the time. I think you've done us all a great service, and it's I can't wait for the next one. I mean, so I appreciate you greatly. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. You're amazing. And just hearing you talk about it, it's very uplifting to me. So I appreciate you. And you saying that it's a love story. You're the second person I've heard say that. Yeah. And that makes my heart swell. I think that, that's what I could hope for. Yeah. So thank you for your time.
You did it. You did a big one there. So, well, I appreciate you, friend. Joe Richardson, Joe Speak Podcast. You can check us out on all of the, hopefully you're checking us out right now, on all of the podcast platforms, etc., on YouTube as well. We also think we're going to cut this in a couple snippets so we can let folks know to click on it and see it. So you guys, like always, Take your time leaving, but hurry back, and we'll see you next time. Joe Speak Podcast. Boom. Mic drop. See you.